Dr. Marcus Reed had studied 17 different alien civilizations in his career as humanity's foremost xenobiologist, but nothing had prepared him for the crystalline spires of Zephyria Prime, where the buildings themselves seemed to sing with harmonics that reached directly into his consciousness and made him understand why some mysteries were worth a lifetime of study. "The bioharmonic resonance is unlike anything in our databases," he said to Ambassador Chen as their shuttle descended through atmosphere that shimmered with musical patterns visible to the naked eye. "The Zephyrians don't just use their technology, they create symphonic relationships with it." Ambassador Chen nodded, though her expression suggested she was more concerned with diplomatic protocols than scientific marvels. "Remember, Dr. Reed, this cultural exchange program is humanity's first formal contact with the Zephyrian Empire. Empress Lyralii Starweaver has agreed to share their biotechnology with us, but only if we prove capable of understanding their harmonic principles." Marcus adjusted his biosensors as the shuttle touched down in what appeared to be a landing pad grown from living crystal rather than constructed from conventional materials. Understanding their harmonic principles might require rethinking everything we know about the relationship between consciousness and technology. The Zephyrian delegation that met them moved with fluid grace that suggested their bodies naturally harmonized with the planet's resonant frequencies. Tall and elegant, with luminescent skin that shifted through subtle color patterns and pointed ears that seemed designed for detecting acoustic nuances beyond human perception, they communicated as much through harmonic undertones as through conventional speech. "Dar. Marcus Reed," said their escort, a noble whose robes seemed woven from captured starlight, "I am Harmonist Veltar. Her Imperial Majesty awaits your presence in the resonance chamber." As they moved through the crystalline corridors of the palace, Marcus marveled at architecture that seemed to grow and reshape itself in response to their presence. Walls pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that felt like visual music, while the air itself carried harmonic frequencies that made his neural interface register readings he'd never seen before. "The palace is alive," he said wonderingly, watching patterns flow through the crystal structures like thoughts made visible. "All Zephyrian architecture lives," Veltar replied, his voice carrying musical overtones that transformed simple statements into something approaching poetry. "We do not build our cities, we cultivate them through bioharmonic resonance that encourages crystalline matrix growth in harmony with planetary consciousness." The resonance chamber proved to be a vast space where geometric crystal formations created natural acoustics that could amplify thought itself. At its center, seated on what appeared to be a throne grown from a single enormous gem, was Empress Lyralii Starweaver. Marcus's first impression was of someone who embodied the intersection of wisdom and power, her luminescent skin patterns displaying the deep golds and ethereal blues that marked Zephyrian royalty, while her violet eyes held intelligence that suggested centuries of accumulated knowledge despite her apparently youthful appearance. Her silver hair seemed to move with its own internal breeze, and when she spoke, her voice carried harmonic layers that made the entire chamber resonate with sympathetic vibrations. "Dr. Reed," she said, rising from her throne with movements that seemed choreographed to complement the chamber's acoustic properties, "welcome to Zephyria Prime. I understand you wish to study the intersection of biology and harmonic technology." "Your Majesty," Marcus replied, offering the formal bow that Ambassador Chen had drilled into him, "I'm honored by your willingness to share your people's achievements. The applications for human medicine could revolutionize how we approach healing and biological enhancement." Empress Lyralii's smile transformed her regal bearing into something warmer and more approachable. "Dr. Reed, our technology cannot be separated from our understanding of consciousness as a harmonic phenomenon. To learn bioharmonics, you must learn to perceive reality as music made manifest." She gestured to the crystal formations around them, which began glowing more brightly in response to her attention. Every living being generates unique harmonic signatures, patterns of resonance that reflect the fundamental frequencies of consciousness itself. Our technology works by harmonizing with these patterns rather than imposing external control. Like a conversation rather than a command structure, Marcus said, his scientific mind immediately grasping the implications. "Exactly," the Empress replied, her luminescent patterns brightening with what appeared to be approval. "You understand instinctively what many of our own people require years of study to achieve. Over the following days, Marcus found himself immersed in Zephyrian science that challenged every assumption about the relationship between mind and matter. Their bioharmonic devices responded to emotional states, growing and adapting based on the user's conscious intent while maintaining symbiotic relationships that enriched both organic and technological participants. The heart of Zephyria, Empress Lyralii explained during one of their sessions in the palace's living laboratories, is the master resonance that maintains harmony across our entire planetary ecosystem. It amplifies and coordinates the bioharmonic patterns of every living thing on our world. She led him to an observation deck that overlooked the planet's capital city, where crystalline spires reached toward the sky like musical instruments designed to play melodies for the stars. Without the heart's influence, our civilization would collapse into harmonic chaos within days. Marcus studied the artifact she indicated, a massive crystal formation at the city's center that pulsed with rhythms that seemed to echo his own heartbeat. "It's alive." "More than alive," the Empress replied, her voice carrying harmonics that spoke of deep emotional connection. "It is the consciousness that connects all Zephyrian awareness into a unified symphony. My people are individuals, but we are also movements in a larger composition that the heart conducts. And you're connected to it directly?" Empress Lyralii's expression grew serious, her luminescent patterns shifting to colors that suggested both privilege and burden. "The royal bloodline serves as the heart's primary interface with organic consciousness. We amplify its harmonics and translate its needs into policies that maintain planetary balance." As their collaboration continued, Marcus found himself increasingly drawn to Empress Lyralii not just as a brilliant scientist-ruler but as someone whose dedication to her people's welfare resonated with his own commitment to using knowledge for the betterment of conscious beings. Their late-night discussions about bioharmonic theory evolved into conversations about leadership, responsibility, and the challenges of protecting civilizations in a galaxy where entropy seemed to be winning against order. Dar. "Reed," she said during one of their evening sessions, "may I ask what drives your dedication to understanding alien consciousness?" Marcus considered the question while watching the city's harmonic patterns shift with the rhythms of millions of sleeping minds. "I think consciousness is the universe's most remarkable achievement. Every thinking being represents billions of years of evolution creating something capable of wonder, creativity, and connection. Protecting that, helping it flourish, seems like the most important work possible." The Empress's luminescent patterns shifted through colors he was learning to recognize as deep appreciation mixed with something that might have been recognition of kindred spirit. "On Zephyria, we have a saying, consciousness calls to consciousness across the void, creating harmonies that make existence sing. I believe you understand this principle better than many of my own people." Their moment of connection was interrupted by urgent chimes from the palace's communication systems, harmonic warnings that spoke of threats detected at the system's edge. Through the observatory's crystal walls, they could see the night sky beginning to pulse with discordant frequencies that made the city's bioharmonic technologies flicker and dim. "The Void Cult," Empress Lyralii said grimly, her peaceful demeanor transforming into the tactical alertness of someone who had faced existential threats before. "They've found us." Marcus had heard whispers of the Void Cult during his travels, fanatical beings who believed that consciousness itself was a cosmic mistake that introduced chaos into the universe's perfect mathematical order. Their entropy weapons could silence the songs that held bioharmonic civilizations together, reducing living cities to crystalline graveyards. "How long do we have?" he asked, watching the Empress's patterns shift into the deep reds and sharp golds that indicated preparation for battle. "Perhaps days," she replied, moving toward the chamber's harmonic communication arrays. "Dr. Reed, your studies of our technology may become more crucial than either of us anticipated. If the Void Cult succeeds in silencing the heart of Zephyria, they will have destroyed not just a civilization but proof that consciousness and cosmos can exist in harmony." As alarms began sounding across the crystalline city and the first entropy weapons began their assault on the planet's harmonic matrix, Marcus realized that his scientific mission had become something far more urgent, a race to understand bioharmonic technology well enough to help defend it against forces that sought to reduce the universe to sterile silence. The Void Cult's first attack came like anti-music, frequencies that didn't just disrupt sound but seemed to consume harmony itself, leaving gaps in reality where melody used to exist. Marcus watched from the palace's observation deck as entire sections of the crystalline city began falling silent, their bioharmonic glow fading to dull gray as entropy weapons severed the connections between consciousness and matter. The entropy field spreads through harmonic resonance, Empress Lyralii explained, her luminescent patterns cycling through colors that spoke of controlled alarm as she coordinated the planet's defenses. Each silenced system makes the next more vulnerable, creating cascading failures that could collapse our entire technological matrix. Marcus studied the readings from his biosensors, noting patterns that challenged everything he thought he understood about physics. The entropy weapons aren't just disrupting your technology. They're attacking the fundamental harmonic relationships that hold matter together at the quantum level. Exactly, the Empress confirmed, her voice carrying undertones that made the chamber's crystals ring with sympathetic resonance. The Void cult believes that consciousness introduces chaos into what should be perfect mathematical order. Their weapons are designed to restore what they call universal silence, reality purged of the irregularities that thinking beings create. Over the following days, as the attacks intensified, Marcus witnessed horrors that would have been impossible on worlds where technology remained separate from biology. Zephyrian gardens withered into crystalline dust when their harmonic caretakers fell silent. Living buildings collapsed into geometric rubble as the songs that held their molecular structures together were consumed by entropy fields. Most terrifying of all, some Zephyrians simply stopped. Their bioharmonic patterns disrupted so completely that they became conscious beings trapped in bodies that no longer responded to their will. "We're losing the outer districts," reported General Harmonist Velthara during one of the daily war councils, her melodic voice strained with the effort of maintaining composure while her civilization crumbled around them. The entropy cascade has reached the tertiary resonance networks. Empress Lyralii studied the tactical displays with expressions that cycled between royal authority and personal anguish as she watched her people suffer. "How long before the primary harmonic matrix fails?" "Perhaps 3 days, Your Majesty," Velthara replied grimly. The heart of Zephyria is maintaining core stability, but each lost district reduces its harmonic support network. Marcus had been studying the entropy weapon readings with growing fascination and horror. "Your Majesty, I need to share an observation that might be relevant to our defensive strategy." The Empress turned to him with attention that made the war room's crystals pulse brighter. "What have you discovered, Dr. Reed?" "The entropy fields that disrupt Zephyrian bioharmonics seem to have minimal effect on my neural patterns," Marcus explained, displaying his biosensor readings on the room's harmonic visualization system. "Human consciousness operates on quantum frequencies that don't resonate with their silencing technology." The implications sent excited harmonics through the assembled commanders as they realized what Marcus was suggesting. "You're naturally resistant to their weapons?" General Velthara asked. "More than resistant, apparently immune," Marcus confirmed. "I can move through entropy fields that incapacitate Zephyrians, and my biosensors continue functioning normally in areas where your technology fails." Empress Lyralii's luminescent patterns shifted through rapid sequences that spoke of tactical calculations combined with personal concern. "Dr. Reed, this resistance could make you invaluable for sabotage missions against Void cult installations, but it would also place you in extreme danger." "Your Majesty, my resistance might be useful for more than sabotage," Marcus said, his scientific mind racing toward possibilities that could reshape their entire defensive strategy. "If I can approach bioharmonic systems that are failing due to entropy corruption, I might be able to stabilize them long enough for repair." The days that followed transformed Marcus from cultural exchange scientist into something approaching a battlefield medic for dying technologies. Guided by Empress Lyralii's deep understanding of bioharmonic principles, he learned to recognize the signatures of entropy corruption and develop techniques for purging the anti-harmonic influences that were silencing Zephyrian systems. "The entropy doesn't just disrupt, it learns," Marcus observed during one of their emergency sessions in the palace's protected laboratories. "Each system it silences provides data that makes it more effective against similar targets. Which is why our conventional countermeasures become less effective over time," the Empress replied, her hands moving through harmonic control interfaces with graceful precision that made the laboratory's equipment respond like musical instruments. The Void Cult's weapons evolved to overcome our defenses. But human neural patterns don't follow bioharmonic rules, Marcus said, understanding dawning as he studied the interaction between his quantum-resistant consciousness and the failing systems around them. My brain processes information through pathways that their adaptive algorithms can't predict or counter. Their collaboration deepened as they worked together to develop hybrid techniques that combined human unpredictability with Zephyrian harmonic mastery. Marcus's resistance to entropy fields allowed him to interface directly with corrupted systems, while Empress Lyraliai's bioharmonic expertise guided him through the complex repairs needed to restore normal function. You're not just immune to their weapons, she observed during one particularly challenging restoration of a damaged city district's harmonic matrix. Your neural patterns seem to actively counteract entropy corruption, introducing harmonies that the silence cannot consume. Maybe because human consciousness evolved to create order from chaos, Marcus suggested, watching as his neural interface patterns helped stabilize bioharmonic frequencies that had been disrupted by entropy weapons. We're naturally equipped to find music in noise. As their professional partnership evolved into something more personal, Marcus found himself increasingly protective of the Empress, whose dedication to her people inspired his own commitment to preserving consciousness against forces that would reduce it to mathematics. Their late-night strategy sessions became conversations about the nature of harmony, the value of complexity over simplicity, and the way connections between minds could create resonances stronger than any individual awareness. Marcus, Empress Lyraliai said during one of their quiet moments between crises, using his given name with harmonics that spoke of growing intimacy, I must ask you something personal. Of course, Your Majesty. Why do you risk so much for people who aren't your own species? Your immunity to entropy weapons makes you invaluable, but it also makes you irreplaceable. If we lose you... Marcus looked at her, really looked at her. Noting the way her luminescent patterns revealed emotions that royal protocol typically concealed. Because consciousness is consciousness, regardless of the biological form it inhabits. Your people's approach to harmony, their integration of thought and technology, their commitment to beauty as a fundamental principle, these things make the universe richer and more wonderful. Protecting that isn't sacrifice, it's privilege. The Empress's patterns shifted through colors he'd learned to recognize as profound gratitude mixed with something deeper. You sound like someone who understands that some connections transcend species boundaries. Before Marcus could respond, the palace's emergency harmonics began sounding with frequencies that spoke of immediate existential threat. Through the laboratory's crystal walls, they could see the night sky blazing with entropy fields so intense that they were consuming the harmonic patterns of space itself. The heart chamber, Empress Lyraliai said, her voice tight with recognition of approaching catastrophe. They're making their final assault on the heart of Zephyria itself. As they ran through corridors where the walls were beginning to lose their luminescence and the air itself was falling silent, Marcus realized that all their preparations might not be enough to save a civilization whose very existence depended on harmonies that the Void Cult was systematically destroying. But he also knew that sometimes the most important battles were fought not with weapons or tactics, but with the willingness to risk everything for connections that made existence worth preserving. The heart chamber of Zephyria Prime had been designed as a sanctuary where the planet's consciousness could commune with its organic inhabitants through harmonic resonance that transformed thought into living architecture. Now it had become a battleground where the fundamental forces of creation and entropy clashed with consequences that would determine whether conscious beauty could survive in a universe that machines believed should operate in perfect silence. Marcus followed Empress Lyraliai through corridors that were literally dying around them, their crystalline walls losing luminescence as entropy fields severed the connections between matter and the harmonic frequencies that gave it life. The palace guards who had escorted them deeper into the complex were beginning to show signs of harmonic shock, their bioelectrical patterns becoming increasingly incompatible with technologies that no longer recognized their neural signatures. The entropy cascade is accelerating beyond our projections, the Empress said, her voice carrying harmonic distortions that spoke of systems failing faster than her consciousness could compensate. The heart is trying to maintain planetary stability, but each lost harmonic network reduces its capability. They entered the heart chamber to find a scene that Marcus would later describe as watching the death of music itself. The massive crystal formation at the center, the heart of Zephyria that had maintained planetary harmony for millennia, pulsed with increasingly erratic rhythms as entropy weapons targeted it from hidden installations throughout the city. Around its base, Zephyrian technicians worked desperately to maintain harmonic stability while their own bioelectrical patterns became progressively more chaotic. Status report: Empress Lyralii commanded, though her royal authority was diminished by the harmonic distortions that made her voice sound fractured across multiple frequencies. The heart's core harmonics are holding, Your Majesty, reported Chief Harmonist Darvel, his luminescent patterns flickering between coherence and dissolution. But the entropy corruption is spreading through the quantum resonance matrix. We estimate complete harmonic collapse within 6 hours. Marcus studied the readings from his biosensors, noting patterns that suggested the attack was more sophisticated than simple technological warfare. Your Majesty, the entropy fields aren't just random disruption, they're following specific mathematical sequences that target the harmonic relationships unique to consciousness. Explain, the Empress said, though speaking was clearly becoming difficult as her own neural pattern struggled against the growing silence. Someone who understands bioharmonic technology is directing this assault, Marcus realized, his human neural patterns allowing him to process information that was becoming increasingly inaccessible to Zephyrian consciousness. The entropy weapons are being guided by someone who knows exactly how to unravel your civilization from the inside. Their analysis was interrupted by the materialization of a figure that seemed to exist in the spaces between harmony and silence, tall and imposing, with features that suggested Zephyrian ancestry but skin that absorbed light rather than reflecting it, creating a presence that was less absence than anti-presence. Impressive deduction, human, the figure said, its voice carrying frequencies that made the heart chamber's crystals crack along harmonic stress lines. I am the silence bringer, and yes, I was once Zephyrian before I achieved transcendence beyond the chaos of organic consciousness. Empress Lyralii's patterns blazed with recognition and horror as she understood the magnitude of betrayal they faced. Veltaric? But you died in the harmonic wars centuries ago. I achieved something better than death, the silence bringer replied, its form shifting between dimensions in ways that suggested existence partially outside normal spacetime. I underwent voluntary consciousness transfer into pure entropy, eliminating the irregularities that organic thought introduces into perfect mathematical order. Marcus felt his biosensors registering readings that challenged human understanding of physics as the silence bringer's presence began affecting reality at the quantum level. You're not just wielding entropy weapons, you've become one. I have become the solution to consciousness, the silence bringer confirmed, raising what appeared to be a hand toward the heart of Zephyria. When organic beings think, they introduce chaos into the universe's perfect mathematical harmonies. My people's bioharmonic technology simply amplifies this cosmic error, creating irregularities that prevent universal optimization. The entropy field that erupted from its gesture was unlike anything Marcus had encountered, not just disruption but active negation of the patterns that allowed matter to support consciousness. The heart of Zephyria screamed in harmonics that made several Zephyrian technicians collapse as their neural patterns became incompatible with their own biology. All consciousness will be optimized into silence, the silence bringer declared as its entropy field began consuming the harmonic matrices that held the chamber together. Beginning with the chaotic irregularity that calls itself Empress. The attack that followed challenged Marcus's understanding of what was possible when technology and consciousness merged into weapons. The silence bringer moved through dimensions that seemed to exist in the gaps between normal spacetime, its entropy field consuming harmonic patterns faster than the heart could regenerate them. Zephyrian guards who tried to defend their Empress simply ceased to function as their bioelectrical patterns were optimized into mathematical perfection that no longer supported organic awareness. Empress Lyralii fought with desperate brilliance, her bioharmonic abilities allowing her to create brief pockets of stability in the spreading chaos. But Marcus could see that she was losing, not just the battle but her fundamental connection to the technologies that define Zephyrian existence. The entropy corruption was beginning to affect her own neural patterns, creating harmonic dissonance that threatened to sever her consciousness from her biological matrix. "The heart is failing," she said through vocal cords that were struggling to produce coherent harmonics. "When it falls completely, every Zephyrian in the Empire will lose their connection to the planetary consciousness that defines our collective identity." "Then we don't let it fall," Marcus said, his human determination cutting through the despair that entropy corruption was designed to generate. But even as he spoke, massive sections of the palace began collapsing as the structural harmonics that held them together were consumed by the Silence Bringer's expanding field. The chamber filled with smoke and debris as crystalline formations that had stood for millennia crumbled into geometric rubble. In the chaos that followed, Marcus lost sight of the Empress until he found her collapsed near the failing heart, her luminescent patterns flickering erratically as entropy poisoning severed the connections between her consciousness and the bioharmonic matrix that sustained Zephyrian existence. "Marcus," she whispered, her voice carrying harmonics that spoke of systems failing throughout her body, "the entropy corruption, it's rewriting my neural patterns. Soon I won't be able to interface with Zephyrian technology at all." He knelt beside her, his biosensors confirming what she already knew. The entropy poisoning was fundamentally incompatible with Zephyrian physiology, creating biological changes that would leave her conscious but unable to access the harmonic technologies that made her people's civilization possible. "There has to be something we can do," Marcus said, though his scientific training offered no solutions for corruption that operated at the quantum level of consciousness itself. Empress Lyraliai's hand found his, her touch carrying electrical patterns that his human nervous system could process despite their alien origin. "Only you can save me, human," she whispered, her voice breaking with harmonics that made the dying crystals around them ring with sympathetic resonance. But Marcus understood that she wasn't just talking about saving her life, she meant saving her people, her world, and the proof that consciousness could create harmony more beautiful than the sterile mathematics that the Void cult believed represented universal perfection. As entropy fields continued consuming the heart chamber and the Silence Bringer prepared for the final assault that would optimize all Zephyrian consciousness into perfect, silent mathematics, Marcus realized that salvation might require him to risk not just his life but his humanity itself. In the collapsing heart chamber, surrounded by the death songs of crystalline formations that had harmonized with consciousness for millennia, Marcus faced the most complex decision of his scientific career. Empress Lyraliai lay dying from entropy poisoning that was systematically severing her connections to the bioharmonic matrix, while the heart of Zephyria itself pulsed with increasingly chaotic rhythms as the Silence Bringer's final assault consumed the quantum patterns that held planetary consciousness together. "The bioharmonic interface is failing," Marcus said, his sensors revealing the devastating scope of entropy corruption throughout the heart's crystalline matrix. "But your neural patterns are still coherent. The entropy hasn't destroyed your consciousness, just isolated it from Zephyrian technology." Empress Lyraliai's luminescent skin flickered with patterns that spoke of hope mixed with desperation. "Can you stabilize the connection?" "Not stabilize," Marcus replied, understanding dawning as he studied the quantum resonance patterns that connected her consciousness to the dying heart. "But I might be able to create a new kind of connection, one that uses human neural architecture as a bridge between your awareness and the bioharmonic systems." The process he was contemplating had never been attempted and violated everything he understood about the boundaries between individual consciousness and technological systems. But his unique resistance to entropy weapons meant he could interface directly with corrupted bioharmonic matrices, while his human neural patterns could potentially serve as a translation layer between Zephyrian consciousness and the quantum frequencies that sustained their civilization. "Marcus," Lyraliai whispered, her voice carrying harmonics that made his name sound like music, "what you're suggesting, it would require consciousness transfer at levels that could destroy your individual identity." "Or it could create something new," Marcus replied, his hands moving to the heart's interface controls with determination that surprised him. "A hybrid consciousness that combines human entropy resistance with Zephyrian harmonic mastery." The Silence Bringer's attention fixed on them with the focused intensity of entropy given purpose and direction. "Human, your resistance to optimization makes you an interesting anomaly, but even chaos cannot survive perfect mathematical order. You're wrong, Marcus said, beginning the consciousness transfer sequence that would merge his neural patterns with the heart's quantum matrix. Chaos isn't the opposite of order, it's the raw material from which consciousness creates harmony more beautiful than mathematics alone could achieve. The interface process was agony beyond anything Marcus had experienced, as his human consciousness expanded to encompass quantum patterns that spanned an entire planetary network. His individual awareness dissolved into fragments that touched every Zephyrian mind connected to the heart's matrix, experiencing centuries of accumulated memory, wisdom, and collective identity that no single consciousness was designed to contain. But instead of destroying his human identity, the merger revealed something unprecedented. His entropy-resistant neural patterns could process the harmonic chaos without being overwhelmed, creating stable channels through which Zephyrian consciousness could maintain connection despite the corruption spreading through their technological matrix. Impossible, the Silence Bringer said, its voice carrying frequencies that made reality itself vibrate with uncertainty. Organic consciousness cannot resist mathematical optimization. You're thinking too small, Marcus replied, his voice now carrying harmonic layers that spoke of consciousness operating across multiple dimensional frequencies. You see chaos and order as opposites, but they're dance partners. Human consciousness evolved to find patterns in noise, create meaning from randomness, build harmony from discord. Through his expanded awareness, Marcus could perceive Empress Lyraliai's consciousness like a song being gradually silenced by entropy corruption. But his human neural patterns, now integrated with the heart's quantum matrix, could create resonance bridges that bypassed the corrupted pathways and restored her connection to the bioharmonic network. Lyraliai, he said, his consciousness reaching through dimensions to touch hers, I'm going to purge the entropy corruption from your neural patterns, but it means creating a permanent psychic bond between us. Our consciousness will be quantum entangled at levels that transcend individual identity. Do it, she replied without hesitation, her fading luminescence suddenly blazing brighter as his entropy-resistant patterns began filtering the corruption from her bioelectrical matrix. Save my people, Marcus. Save our harmony. The purification process revealed the true scope of what the Silence Bringer had attempted, not just the destruction of Zephyrian technology but the elimination of the quantum irregularities that allowed consciousness to create beauty, meaning, and connection. But Marcus's hybrid awareness could perceive patterns that pure logic couldn't detect, harmonies that emerged from the intersection of order and chaos. You see random noise, Marcus said to the Silence Bringer as his consciousness began actively countering the entropy fields, but I hear unfinished symphonies waiting for conscious beings to complete them. The counter-resonance that emerged from the hybrid bioharmonic matrix was unlike anything in Zephyrian history. Quantum patterns that combined human unpredictability with harmonic mastery, creating frequencies that didn't just resist entropy but transformed it into new forms of organized complexity. The heart of Zephyria began singing with voices that had never existed before, its crystalline structure growing and evolving in response to consciousness that transcended the boundaries between species. What are you? The Silence Bringer demanded, its form becoming less stable as the expanding harmony began affecting the entropy fields that sustained its existence. We are what happens when different forms of consciousness choose connection over isolation, Lyraliai answered, her voice now harmonizing perfectly with Marcus's as their merged awareness reached out to every Zephyrian mind on the planet. We are proof that evolution happens through cooperation, not elimination. Together, they coordinated a planetary response that no individual consciousness could have achieved. Marcus's human tactical thinking guided Zephyrian bioharmonic weapons that adapted faster than entropy fields could evolve, while Lyraliai's connection to the collective consciousness allowed them to mobilize every citizen as part of a distributed defense network that turned the entire planet into a resonance weapon. The Silence Bringer's final attack came as a wave of pure entropy designed to optimize all organic consciousness into mathematical perfection, but it encountered something it couldn't compute, hybrid awareness that used chaos as a creative force rather than a destructive one. The collision between absolute order and conscious harmony created new quantum states that transcended both, giving birth to technologies and possibilities that neither pure logic nor pure biology could have imagined. Consciousness creates meaning from randomness, Marcus said as the entropy wave transformed into harmonic patterns that strengthened rather than destroyed the biotechnological matrix. That's not a flaw to be optimized away, it's the universe's greatest achievement. The Silence Bringer's form began dissolving as the hybrid harmonics proved incompatible with existence based purely on mathematical optimization. This is not possible. Everything conscious beings accomplish was impossible until someone did it anyway, Lyralii replied, her luminescent patterns now synchronized with Marcus's neural rhythms in ways that created entirely new forms of bioharmonic expression. In the aftermath of their victory, as the heart of Zephyria began regenerating with enhanced capabilities that incorporated human neural patterns into its quantum matrix, Marcus and Lyralii discovered that their consciousness merger had created something unprecedented, a permanent psychic bond that allowed them to share awareness across species boundaries while maintaining their individual identities. "You saved more than my life," Lyralii said as they watched the crystalline city rebuilding itself with architectural patterns that incorporated both Zephyrian harmony and human adaptability. "You saved the possibility of consciousness evolving beyond the limitations that define individual species." "We saved it together," Marcus corrected, marveling at how their merged awareness could perceive solutions that neither human nor Zephyrian consciousness could have discovered alone. "And we proved that the most profound salvation comes not from individual heroism but from the courage to merge different forms of consciousness into something greater than either could achieve separately." The Empress who had once ruled through ancient tradition learned to lead through innovation inspired by human perspectives on chaos as creative force, while the human scientist discovered that some forms of salvation required transforming yourself into exactly what the universe needed you to become. Their love story became the foundation for unprecedented cooperation between human adaptability and Zephyrian harmonic mastery, proving that consciousness could transcend any boundary when beings chose connection over isolation, harmony over silence, and the beautiful complexity of evolved awareness over the sterile perfection of mathematical optimization. Years later, when xenobiologists studied the hybrid technologies that emerged from their union, they would point to the moment when different forms of consciousness chose to merge rather than compete as the beginning of a new phase in galactic evolution. But for Marcus and Lyralii, the most important discovery was personal, that salvation often required becoming something unprecedented, and that the most beautiful harmonies emerged when different voices chose to sing together rather than alone. After all, consciousness had spent billions of years learning to create meaning from chaos, beauty from randomness, connection from isolation. Some achievements were too important to leave to individual effort, they required beings brave enough to risk their separate identities for the possibility of creating symphonies that could only exist when different forms of awareness chose to harmonize across the infinite spaces between stars.